Danger lurked beneath the tranquil surface of the water. In the depths, a formidable and fearsome predator, a tiger shark, had already spotted Jaden's figure on the surface. The shark moved silently, its powerful body slicing through the water as it closed on its unsuspecting prey. The moment arrived swiftly and without warning. With a sudden burst of speed, the tiger shark lunged at the surface, its dorsal fin cutting through the water like a blade. It struck the floating board Jaden had been standing on, jolting it violently. Jaden, lost in his thoughts and the beauty of his surroundings, was caught off guard. He hadn't been paying attention to the ominous presence lurking below. As the board wobbled and tilted, Jaden lost his balance and tumbled into the water directly into the path of the hungry tiger shark. In an instant, the tranquil scene was transformed into a nightmarish tableau. The water erupted in a chaotic frenzy of thrashing, churning waves as the shark seized its prey. Jaden's world was plunged into darkness and terror as he felt the jaws of the tiger shark clamp down on him. The horrifying reality of the situation unfolded in the blink of an eye. Jaden's life was extinguished instantly, his body becoming one with the sea. The water turned crimson as his blood mingled with the ocean, creating a gruesome tableau of nature's brutality. Back on the beach, Jaden's friends were paralyzed with shock and fear as they witnessed the unthinkable unfold. Jenna's camera fell to the sand, forgotten as she screamed in horror. They watched helplessly as the tiger shark retreated into the depths. Jaden's friends called out for help. Summoning the university with local authorities, the university staff launched a search and rescue mission in a desperate attempt to recover Jaden's body. Despite their exhaustive efforts, the sea remained unforgiving, refusing to yield its grim secret. The relentless currents and the vast expanse of the ocean thwarted their every attempt to find any trace of their fallen comrade. Days turned into nights, and the search continued. His vibrant spirit and his unquenchable thirst for adventure lived on in the hearts of those who had known him. His tragic passing served as a stark reminder of the unpredictable and unforgiving nature of the world, a reminder to cherish each moment and each person in themselves. When Arav saw a board for hire, he persuaded his father to Arav. They started their underwater journey after renting the board and having Arav's father pay for the expenses. Arav was a whirlwind of activity, shouting to his father and striking up conversations with the seaside inhabitants. With the sound of the waves as their constant companion and the sea wind blowing through their hair, their voyage had already been unforgettable. But that day, fate had more in store for them. They were met with an amazing and unanticipated encounter as they glided through the serene waters. The giant tiger shark they had ever seen surfaced from the depths. Even though Arav was initially excited to see such a magnificent animal, he couldn't help but get a chill of terror. It was a rendezvous with one of the most formidable predators in the ocean. Therefore, this was no ordinary encounter. They felt goosebumps as the enormous tiger shark glided gracefully and powerfully toward their boat. It made a circle around the board, almost like it was these two intrepid travelers. The enormous shark made another pass, slamming into the board, as Arav's heart raced and his terror intensified. Arav lost his balance due to the crash, which sent shockwaves through the small craft. His arms were slightly bruised as the shark's muscular body brushed against them during the following mayhem. The board wobbled alarmingly, tipping over and causing panic. Swiftly moving, the board's operator expertly steered it across the safety area and away from the shark that was drawing near. Despite the terrible situation, Arav's father attempted to reassure his son in a moment of bravery and love. He tried to contain Arav's dread despite the confusion and adrenaline rush the day he faced the biggest tiger shark head-on, and the lessons he learned from it have stuck with him ever since, reminding him of the wonder and unpredictableness. The day of their departure, they were ready to embark on this thrilling journey. Australia's natural beauty left them in awe, and they relished every moment there. When fatigue to her, initially she didn't think much of it, assuming it was a regular occurrence. She called out to her friends to join her, but they were engrossed in their activities and didn't pay much attention. However, as Jaya kept recording, she realized that the water was not receding, but advancing rapidly toward her. Panic washed over her, and she desperately called her friends for help. Ignoring their initial reluctance, they rushed to her side. Amid this chaos, a terrifying event unfolded. A massive tiger shark emerged from the depths of the sea and collided with Jaya's board. Remarkably, she managed to maintain her balance, but the encounter left her afraid. The group of friends had heard stories of the dangers of tiger sharks, and their worst fears were coming true. Seeing the shark approach once again, Jaya took quick action. She attempted to paddle her board away from the predator, hoping to outmaneuver it. However, the relentless tiger shark struck her board again, hitting it from the side. Jaya's friends were now frantic, shouting for her to return to safety. In a desperate bid to escape, Jaya did her best to paddle away as fast as possible. But the relentless tiger shark persisted. The situation grew increasingly dire, and her friends panicked as they witnessed the terrifying encounter. In sheer terror, the tiger shark made a final lunge and struck the side of Jaya's board with great force. A piece of equipment that had fallen into the water temporarily distracted the shark, and this impact caused the board to crack. Jaya seized an opportunity, frantically paddling away from the predator. With a mixture of relief and fear, she managed to put some distance between herself and the shark. Realizing her danger, her friends called for help and alerted the authorities. A cry for assistance echoed across the water, and the Coast Guard swiftly arrived to intervene. With their quick response, they managed to deter the tiger shark and ensure Jaya's safety. The shark, frustrated and foiled in its pursuit, disappeared into the depths of the sea. Trembling and traumatized, Jaya was rescued from the water and brought to the shore. Her friends rushed to her side, relieved she was safe but deeply shaken.
She decided to combine her love of sharks with her passion for filmmaking and set out to make a documentary about these misunderstood. Her crew set out with a small boat, equipped with all the necessary gear. They headed towards a known shark habitat, eager to begin filming. As they approached the area, Julia could feel her heart pounding with excitement and nervousness. The crew quickly got to work, setting up cameras and preparing the bait to attract the sharks. Julia watched in awe as several of the creatures appeared, circling around the boat. She couldn't believe how beautiful they were, with their sleek bodies and piercing eyes. But then, in a split second, everything changed. One of the sharks suddenly lunged towards the boat, and Julia felt a sharp pain in her leg. She looked down to see the shark's teeth buried in her flesh, and felt a surge of terror wash over her. She knew that this was the moment she had always feared, the moment when her love for sharks could cost her her life. The crew quickly sprang into action, pulling Julia back onto the boat and rushing her to shore. She was in excruciating pain, but she knew that her survival depended on staying. When the documentary was released, it was an instant sensation. People were moved by Julia's story and the beauty and complexity of the footage. They were also challenged to think differently about sharks and to consider their role in the ocean ecosystem. Even though she had been attacked by a shark, she knew that she had never felt more alive or more connected to the ocean. Deepened, and they turned their hobby into a profession. Together, they created a YouTube channel dedicated to wildlife documentaries, specializing in sharks. Their unique videos showcased the lives of these creatures and dispelled many of the myths and misconceptions that surrounded them. They braved dangerous waters and weather to capture stunning footage that left viewers spellbound. Behind the camera, Matthew and Gina were not only colleagues, but also lifelong best friends, with a deep respect for the ocean and its inhabitants. That's why when their YouTube channel hit 1 million subscribers, Matthew and Gina were over the moon. They had come a long way since starting their wildlife documentaries together and wanted to celebrate with their loyal viewers. To show their gratitude, they decided to let their followers choose the topic for their next documentary. They set up a poll and asked viewers to vote for the wildlife they wanted to see next. The poll results were in, and the winner was the bull sharks of the Zambezi River in Mozambique. The duo packed their bags and headed to Mozambique, where they met up with their local guide, who would take them to the best spots to film the bull sharks. They spent several days on the river, getting up early in the morning to catch the sharks feeding, and staying out late at night to capture their nocturnal habits. The 3 days of the shoot had been nothing short of amazing. Matthew and Gina had captured some incredible footage of the bull sharks in the Zambezi River, showcasing their strength, speed, and grace. But there was something that had been nagging at Matthew ever since they arrived. Despite bull sharks being known to be solitary hunters, many of the sharks they observed were hunting in groups, coordinating their attacks and sharing their prey. This was an unusual phenomenon, and Matthew couldn't help but wonder why this was happening. As he pondered this mystery, Gina simply shrugged it off, saying that it was just a coincidence. But Matthew knew there was more to it than that. He could sense it in the way the sharks moved, the way they communicated with each other, and the way they worked together to take down their prey. On the 4th day of their expedition along the river, while Gina and Matthew were busy filming at the mouth of the river, Gina's sharp eyes caught a glimpse of a bull shark going about its hunting routine, unperturbed by their presence. Gina signaled Matthew to join her in getting a better shot of the magnificent creature, but he urged her to leave the shark alone and exit the water. Gina, entranced by the shark's sleek movements, ignored his warnings and persisted in tracking the predator, unaware of the lurking danger nearby. Only when it was too late did she realize she had become the target of another apex predator. Dread washed over Gina as she faced a colossal 13-foot bull shark with lifeless eyes, realizing she was the hunted, not the hunter. Time stood still as she grappled with shock, her heart pounding in her chest as she tried to make sense of the situation. With lightning speed, the bull shark lunged at Gina, sinking its teeth into her neck. The sheer force of the attack was overwhelming, and Gina felt the crunch of bones as the shark's serrated teeth tore through her flesh. Blood gushed out of her carotid arteries, staining the once murky waters a horrifying shade of crimson red. Gina's body went into shock as she desperately tried to fend off the relentless predator, but her strength faded quickly. The pain in her grievous wound was unbearable, and the shark's thrashing only worsened the damage. Gina could feel her life draining away, her vision growing hazy as the world around her blurred into darkness. It was a harrowing and tragic end to what was supposed to be an ordinary day of filming. Matthew stood frozen in terror as he watched the horrific scene unfold before him. He couldn't move, couldn't bring himself to intervene as the bull shark continued to maul his best friend Gina to death. The sight was gut-wrenching, and Matthew felt a sense of helplessness wash over him. But the horror didn't end there. To Matthew's horror, he saw other bull sharks converging on the gruesome scene. They were drawn by the scent of blood in the water, and they were closing in fast. Matthew realized with a sinking feeling that Gina's brutal fate was not over yet. One particularly large bull shark, measured around 10 feet in length, charged towards Gina and bit her leg clean off her body. The shark swiftly grabbed its prize and disappeared into the depths of the water, leaving a trail of blood in its wake. The other bull sharks wasted no time in joining the feeding frenzy. They tore into Gina's lifeless, mangled body, ripping off her arms, legs, and head with vicious ferocity. The water turned a sickening shade of red as Gina's blood mixed with the surrounding currents. Matthew could hardly believe what he was witnessing. Within moments, nothing was left of Gina. Her body had been reduced to a gory mess, devoured by the hungry bull sharks. Once Matthew realized that his friend Gina was gone, he snapped out of his shock and realized that he needed to get out of the water before he became the next target. His body was filled with adrenaline and fear as he swam fast as he could, his arms and legs pumping furiously through the water. He had never swum so fast in his life. He pushed himself to the brink as he felt his muscles burning while swimming. Looking back, he saw a fin approaching, and he swam even faster, gritting his teeth to reach the shore. Collapsing onto the sand, he cried uncontrollably. This woman, his best friend, was ripped apart by a pack of bull sharks, and he couldn't do anything to save her. Matthew survived the ordeal, but the emotional and psychological trauma of that instant into their snorkeling gear. The world had turned into a nightmare, a surreal and terrifying landscape of pain and terror. As the seconds ticked by, Clara's strength began to fade, and she knew that she was fighting a losing battle. But still, she fought on, determined to survive, to live another day, no matter what the cost. A blood-curdling scream escaped Clara's lips as the jaws of the bull shark clamped down on her leg, its teeth sinking deeper into her flesh with every passing second. The pain was unbearable, a searing agony that consumed her entire being. She felt as though she was being torn apart, her body racked with spasms of pain. But even as the shark thrashed around, trying to drag her deeper into the water, Clara felt a strong hand grab her and pull her away. It was George, reacting with lightning speed, his muscles bulging with the effort of hauling her to safety. His grip was iron, his determination unshakable, as he battled against the brute force of the shark. The ocean was in turmoil as the predator and prey battled fiercely in a maelstrom of foam and bubbles. The deafening sound of waves crashing was overshadowed by the thrashing of the shark's tail as it relentlessly pursued Clara and George. Clara felt the rough, abrasive texture of the shark's skin scrape against her leg, sending shivers of terror down her spine. The jaws of the monstrous creature clamped down with a force that threatened to break her bones as she felt the warmth of her own blood spilling into the water. As Clara's vision began to blur and her strength started to wane, she thought it was the end. But then, she felt George's grip tighten around her and his muscles tensed with a sudden burst of energy. He pulled her away from the jaws of death, and they hurtled towards the surface, as if escaping from the depths of hell itself. Gasping for air, Claire broke through the surface, her chest heaving as she gulped in a great lungful of salty air. She looked around frantically, expecting to see the shark's fin, closing in on them at any moment. But to her relief, there was only the sun-drenched sky and the gentle lapping of waves against the shore. It was a narrow escape, but they had survived. And as they lay on the sand, exhausted and shaken, Clara knew that she owed her life to George's bravery and quick thinking. Clara and George had narrowly escaped with their lives, but the terror of the attack would haunt them forever. From that day on, they never went into the water without a healthy dose of caution, knowing that danger could be lurking as some of the most beautiful and diverse wildlife in the world. From the smallest critters that can kill you with a single touch, to massive beasts that dominate the ocean. Sharks are commonplace in Australia and notorious for being extremely aggressive when provoked, something that Felix Marsh would come to find out during a scuba dive west of Perth in 2010. Faulty instruction and poor judgment would change Felix's life forever as he came face to face with the power of a massive great white shark. Felix was a Perth resident and spent a great deal of his life in the water, surfing in his free time when not at his job as a construction worker. However, one day, one of his friends came to him with a proposition of taking a scuba diving class, where an instructor would show them the ropes, and they would be able to check out some of the coral life near the shoreline and see what sorts of fish roam around it. Felix was quick to accept the proposition, and they set up their dive to be in the following week. He managed to snag some free time from work, so everything was going according to plan. On the day of their scheduled dive, Felix and his friend Jan went to the beach before everyone else, and they were both comfortable with surfing on the surface of the water, but not so much being under it. There was no one at the meeting place for the dive. However, he had a friendly outlook and seemed confident, so the group went along with it. They boarded a small boat stocked with the necessary gear for a scuba dive and went out a few hundred yards from the shore. This was a rookie dive, so the instructor only wanted to show them the basics and some of the underwater flora and fauna through a quick dive. After a rather tedious but detailed instruction on how the scuba gear is supposed to work and how they had to behave in the water, some basic communication signals, and more. Before long, the 6 of them took their positions on each side of the boat and flung themselves back into the water. Felix remembered that the initial shock of the cold water was disorienting at the start, but he was quick to get acclimated and was gliding through the water in no time. He was struck by the immediate beauty of the corals below them and the, at a glance, millions of fish swimming around them. At the instructor's command, they commenced the descent lower so they could see the reef more clearly. Felix and Jan were entranced by the fish and the vivid beauty of the reef, but they couldn't help but feel like they were being watched. In truth, they were fine as the instructor had years of experience under his belt. The group continued descending until they were a few yards from the reef itself. The instructor told them that they were not to touch anything on the reef, as it was a single massive organism and it mustn't be disturbed. The group was okay with that, so they circled the reef and took in the sights. After a few minutes, Felix felt a strong grip on his shoulder and turned to see Jan with a terrified expression on his face, pointing beyond the reef. The pair went to investigate, only to find that the reef was being stalked by a massive great white shark. Jan later reported that the beast must have been around 20 feet, which is the maximum length a great white can reach. They immediately backed up and went to tell the instructor, who pointed for them to surface. After they breached the surface, a few of the divers immediately panicked and started swimming towards the boat, but the instructor stopped them and said there was nothing to worry about. As long as they didn't disturb the shark, they were fine. Felix and Jan were calmed by this information, but the rest of the group did not feel comfortable remaining in the water, much less after the guide suggested that they swim to the shark to interact with it. Felix, Jan, and the instructor went for another dive while the rest of the group went to the boat, and with each passing second, the pair became more paranoid that the shark would attack them. But they figured that the experience would be worth the risk. As they approached the shark, Felix thought about how dead its black eyes looked, but they didn't seem threatening. They got close to it at the instructor's command and touched the shark, amazed at how rough the surface of its skin felt, even through the mesh of the wetsuit. It was covered in scars, most likely from previous battles for dominance with other sharks. The shark circled them a few times, and it seemed to be minding its own business. However, things changed when they noticed that it started getting uncomfortably close to Jan, which Felix signaled to the instructor, but he didn't respond. This irritated Felix, who quickly swam up to Jan and pulled him away. This caught the shark's attention. As though a switch flipped, the shark suddenly twisted in its trajectory and made a beeline toward Felix, sinking its teeth into his arm and flailing wildly, seemingly trying to rip it off. Felix's respirator immediately fell out of his mouth as he let out a scream that was muted by the water around him. The instructor and Jan immediately swam up to attempt to free Felix, but the shark was simply too strong. Before they knew it, the water was red with Felix's blood, and they could barely see anything. Jan, who was holding on to Felix, felt his friend float into his arms as the shark shot away from them with a trophy in its mouth. Felix was unconscious by this point and losing a tremendous amount of blood, so Jan immediately started swimming up, clutching his friend by his side, with the instructor following close. When they breached the surface, the rest of the group on the boat was waiting with bated breath, as they didn't know what else to do. But two of them rushed to pull Felix out of the water. They managed to get him on the deck of the ship, and one of the divers went to get some cloth from her bag to tie off Felix's mangled arm. It was completely torn off at the elbow, with visible bone and sinew sticking out. Jan later remarked that it was no wonder that he passed out from the pain, as the injury was so horrific. The instructor rushed to the wheel of the boat and sped them towards the shore, alerting the Coast Guard about the situation, so there was an ambulance ready for them when they arrived. Jan stayed with Felix. Felix and Jan's friendship only deepened. The reason the instructor did not act in time was that he was holding, and without any particular reason, he decided to take the boat for a trip around the island. The situation turned dire when the vessel's engine suddenly faltered, refusing to restart. Left stranded in the frigid waters near the island, Francis attempted to call for assistance, but was informed that it could be a considerable amount of time before a tugboat would arrive to aid him. With no means of propulsion and an uncertain wait ahead, he found himself in a precarious predicament. As Francis sat there waiting for the tugboat to rescue him and his stranded vessel, he couldn't help but feel restless. Something was nagging at him, like a persistent itch that he couldn't scratch. Suddenly, he remembered the acrid scent of smoke that had filled his nostrils earlier, emanating from the engine room. His curiosity piqued, he made his way to the aft of the boat, gingerly leaning over the edge of the deck to peer into the mechanical abyss below. It was then in that vulnerable position that fate decided to strike its cruel hand. Before Francis could react, a monstrous figure emerged from the depths of the frigid waters surrounding the boat. It was a behemoth of the sea, a great white shark, with jaws wide open and rows of serrated teeth glistening in the sunlight. With ferocious speed, it lunged at Francis, sinking its teeth into his shoulder with a bone-crushing force. A blood-curdling scream escaped Francis's lips as searing pain shot through his body. He felt as if his flesh was being torn apart, the shark's teeth slicing through his skin like a hot knife through butter. Blood poured out from the wound, mingling with the salty waters of the San Francisco Bay, staining the once calm surface a deep crimson. Francis thrashed and writhed, desperately trying to free himself from the jaws of the predator. But the shark's grip was relentless, its teeth sinking deeper into his shoulder with each thrash and pull. The excruciating pain was overwhelming, and Francis could feel his strength ebbing away, replaced by a numbing sensation as blood loss took its toll. As the water closed in around him, Francis realized he was in a fight for his life. He tried to fend off the shark with his free hand, desperately striking its sleek body, but it seemed impervious to his feeble attempts. The shark's thrashing movements only served to drag Francis further away from the safety of the boat, deeper into the icy waters of the bay. Francis felt a sense of hopelessness creeping over him. His body grew weak, and his vision blurred. He knew he was running out of time. But then, a surge of determination coursed through him, fueled by a primal instinct to survive. Summoning every ounce of strength he had, Francis reached out with his free hand and groped for the shark's eye. With a primal roar of pain and determination, Francis mustered every bit of strength he had to hold on to the shark's eye, feeling its squirming body thrash and writhe in agony beneath him. His grip was unrelenting, his fingers digging into the soft flesh of the predator's eye as he clung to life with every fiber of his being. The shark, shocked by the sudden attack, momentarily let go of Francis's shoulder, giving him the chance he needed to pull himself away from its razor-sharp teeth. Francis felt a searing pain rip through his flesh as he tore himself free. His shoulder and arm mangled beyond recognition. But he refused to give up even as the water around him turned crimson with his own blood. He knew that his only chance of survival was to fight back with everything he had. With a primal scream of defiance, Francis kicked the shark's nose with all his might, feeling the force of the impact reverberate through his entire body. The shark, stunned and in pain, swam away in a sudden burst of speed, disappearing into the murky depths. Francis was left floating in the water, bleeding and battered, but alive. He knew he couldn't make it back to the boat on his own, but he refused to give up. With a flicker of hope, he looked towards the horizon, desperately scanning for any signs of rescue. And then, like a beacon of hope, a tugboat appeared on the horizon, rushing towards him. It was the backup he had called for earlier. Francis felt a surge of relief and gratitude as he was pulled out of the water and on and out of the nooks and crannies, and he saw lobsters and crabs scurrying along the ocean floor. He also noticed that the great white shark seemed to be hunting around the wreck, using it as a source of food. Harvey watched in amazement as the shark darted in and out of the shadows, searching for prey. For a few minutes, Harvey forgot his fear and was completely absorbed in the underwater world around him. He was so engrossed in his observations when he felt something shift in his backpack. He tried to adjust it, but in doing so, he accidentally kicked a small rock that had been resting on the ocean floor. The sound of the rock hitting the shipwreck echoed through the water, and suddenly, Harvey heard a loud thrashing sound. He looked around and saw a massive shark heading straight for him. Harvey knew that he had made a mistake. He had accidentally disturbed the shark's peaceful existence and now put himself in grave danger. He tried to swim away as fast as he could, but the shark was too fast. It closed in on him, and Harvey could see its sharp teeth glinting in the dim light. The group was horrified as they watched the shark relentlessly attack Harvey, its jaws clamped tightly around his shoulder. Without wasting a second, the group of divers sprang into action. They formed a human chain, trying to distract the shark and draw its attention away from Harvey. Some of them even swam towards the shark and tried to hit it with their diving gear. Another diver signaled for the group to surface and call for help, hoping that a nearby boat or rescue team could come to their aid. However, the shark was too strong and too determined to let go of its prey. It thrashed around violently, causing chaos in the water. The shark more a great white shark as a living testament to resilience and survival. His body bore the scars of the harrowing ordeal, a reminder of the ferocity of nature's predators, or a sight to behold. The crystal clear water sparkled under the bright sun, and the soft sand felt warm and inviting underfoot. The ocean breeze carried with it the scent of salt and sea. His friends to rent a small yacht for the day, promising them a day of adventure and excitement. As they sailed further away from the shore, the group cracked open beers and started to let loose. The sun was shining, the water was warm, and the day was theirs of the Great Barrier Reef. Harvey woke up in his small cabin on board the dive boat. He was excited to begin another day of diving and exploring the ray, gliding gracefully overhead, and he felt a rush of excitement and awe. For the next hour, Harvey and his dive buddies explored the reef, taking in the breathtaking beauty of this underwater paradise. They spotted a sea turtle lazily swimming by, and Harvey snapped some photos with his underwater camera. He also saw a small octopus hiding in a crevice and a bright orange starfish clinging to a rock. As they ascended back to the surface, Harvey felt a sense of exhilaration and joy. He couldn't wait for the next dive, which was scheduled for later that morning. After a brief break, Harvey and the others geared up again and headed back into the water. This time, they were on a mission to locate a sunken shipwreck that was rumored to be in the area. Using their compasses and underwater maps, they navigated through the reef until they reached the spot where the wreck was supposed to be. At first, they saw nothing but sand and coral, but suddenly, Harvey spotted a dark shape looming in the distance. As they got closer, they realized it was indeed a shipwreck, covered in barnacles and surrounded by schools of fish. They swam around the wreck, exploring its nooks and crannies.